Welcome to the fourth edition of the Keep It Brief, an Echoes of New Eden production. I am your host with the most Listexia this side of Jita, Crimson King. Recently, so let's see. Let's think of the best way to get into this, because I am as a content creator, I do not actually have codes or things to give out. I am just a junior content creator, is what M4A1 got back to me with this week. But I still have prizes to give, so please correct me on things. I don't know how to give NetEase prizes for correcting me on expected value of being a content creator, but hey, it is what it is. Also, we're looking to get Rambo into the senior content creator position. So please help us beat Damon Zell by liking and subscribing. And if you haven't watched Echoes from the Front, go watch Echoes from the Front and give Damon Zell a like and a subscription too. Dude deserves it. But keep an eye out for Rambo, especially. Him and Taylor Rick. Taylor Rick also probably deserves to be a senior content creator. And with that little bit of what Sam Harris would call housekeeping out of the way, but what I'm going to call selling out, let's get into the actual content for today's brief. So the format is the same. The words change, but the song remains the same. And then for the intro today, I've got a quote actually from earlier last week from Reddit. I said, "If you think a ship is useless, the problem isn't with the ship." And Bradrick went off and quoted me and made this awesome post talking through like the different expectations and thoughts surrounding that. But I want to be clear that like minions in League of Legends, for example, those have uses. Like you win the game by pushing lanes. Pawns in chess, they are the weakest unit in the game, but they also have uses. You win the game by positioning well, putting them in places where they serve or trap enemy pieces of the same caliber. In EVE Echoes, the weakest ships in the game often have the best return on investment. That's not the best rate of ISK income overall, but it is the best value pound for pound, what you're paying for in stats. So flying cheaper ships over the long haul is more ISK efficient, even if it's not a better ISK earner. You can either sprint towards the top of the mountain or enjoy the ride. Like, chill, enjoy the way up. Build a wealth of experience, not necessarily a wealth of ISK. Because if your goal in EVE is just to watch a number rise, I can point you towards Cookie Clicker and a bunch of other games that will scratch that itch more efficiently and a lot more cheaply. But if your goal is to have a good time with the game, try new ships, blow up new ships, lose new ships, sell those ships once you've decided, nah, it's not for me. Get a fleet together of a bunch of people in like tier 4 E-War frigates and go see what you can kill. You'll be surprised, especially with those things. Tracking disruptors against a battleship and their small targets, good tackle in the mix. You could probably get away with some pretty silly things. I'm hoping to get a fleet together doing a couple of dictors with just a mess of rifters would be my dream. I would be giddy as a kid in a candy store in a fleet like that, just because it's silly and absurd, and maybe you get a kill, maybe not. Certainly about the same odds of potentially getting a kill as flying any other Yeet fleet. Anyway, that's just my thinking in general on the tier system, for example, and ships within the game, for example. Like, you don't go into StarCraft saying that your workers are useless, right? Like, they are not combat effective, but that's your farm, man. Like, don't bash the farmers. You use your tools effectively, and have your teammates use their tools effectively. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the CFO report. And real quick, what we're going to talk about in today's episode: covert ops frigates, fitting them, and their different uses, module types, and the different like applications of those. You'll get to find out my favorite module type here. And then base busting, why I think people should be destroying pirate bases, and why I think it's absurd that nobody really does, and harmful to the game that nobody really does. And then finally the playlist, same sort of spiel as last week. All right, so for the CFO report, Team Tuna is doing pretty decent. Not the best, but doing okay. My personal wallet as of Friday was at 78 mil. It's back down to 13 mil. I believe I'll have to double check here in a sec, but the corporate wallet is stable around 3 bill as of Friday. Our expenses as they stand are about 5 bill every month ish. And that's not including a lot of like the pilot programs and SRP, all those expenses that like are unknown, right? Like there's expected expenses, and I'm expecting my teammates and friends to fly within their means, but there's also the expectation of support in creating that content. So different programs feed into that, and that's liable to change over the coming months. We'll see. Assets in play, got a 1.3 bill or so on the market and 3.4 bill in investment. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those resources that we invest in as well, and pull back the kimono a little bit further with this week's topics than in previous weeks. If you want to read the fine print, the small text, the slides, the link to the slides is down in the doobly-doo. Feel free to go ahead and take a look. I'm always looking for comment too. If you want to see a slide, or if there's something on there that like you just don't like or you don't want to see anymore, let me know and I'll fix it. I'll change things. I want to make this the most useful show for you and the most entertaining show for me. Pulling back the kimono 1 week at a time. Here's another one of those AI generated kimonos. This one's space themed, which is pretty dope. Still on the road for secret trafficking containers. About 967 at the moment, not including the rare boxes. I've got an order on the market for over 40, I believe, but it's at a price that just isn't moving. So I might have to up the price there to make this happen, or just go exploring nonstop for the next week or so. Always looking for an excuse for more content, eh? Goals for the corporation overall. We've got some good industry people starting to take on orders, but as I said last week, I'm looking to get more marketeers within there. People who just take the greens off my hand and flip them, man. Sell the stuff that I am too lazy to sell, because we are gathering resources as best we can, and if it's just sitting in a hangar, it ain't really working for us. We got to put those assets to use, convert them into ISK or into firepower, and that is how the game is played. Goal is to have some form of content within Tuna every day of the week, or within the YOLO Alliance, and I think we're about there, but we don't have all of the time zones covered is the main like limiting factor. And then, as always, minimizing exposure to risk means moving stuff out of the POSs, moving stuff out of our sovereignty and into NPC stations where it's safe. And keeping that movement, like, because we're not a very big corporation, it's really easy to minimize our exposure overall. And that's my general strategy as the CFO for Tuna at the moment. That's subject to change as things happen. We'll see. Moving on to the main event, Fit for the Fight. I love covert ops frigates. When I was first starting out in the game, Tech 5, just starting to learn things, these were my favorite birds to fly. And each has their own like special use. You've got the Imicus for transportation. If you want to move more stuff than in any other covert ops ship, the Imicus covert ops is the one for you. If you want a good all-arounder, the Probe, that is my favorite to fly. I have a pair of Probe Explorers, which are basically just covert ops frigates with added utility. Those are my main explorers in game, not including the Noctis. But the Probe is good just all around. You've got the Heron for scanning. It gives you a little bit of a boost to scanning down different anomalies and different sites. So if you find yourself wanting to spend your skills elsewhere and just want to dabble in exploration or dabble in stealing PI, the Heron's a pretty good fit for that. Oddly enough, the price has increased on that recently, and I'm a bit surprised by that, because I would expect the Magnate to have the most utility out of the bunch, because it has the lowest, or excuse me, it has the fastest realign time. It's got the best inertial mod. It can pivot. It can steal goods very easily compared to the others. So it is the best thief, and also I would say the best high-sec transporter. When you're not looking for mass. If you're moving rare goods around, the Magnet's a good bet. And when you're looking to procure goods that you did not earn, the Magnet is also the best bet. But the operational goals for covert ops frigates, these are the ships for smugglers and scoundrels. If you have this weird fantasy of being Han Solo, the Probe even kind of looks like the Millennium Falcon. I mean, a little bit. It has its escape pod still, unlike the Millennium Falcon, but hey, all ships in EVE do. You are a pod pilot. It is the way. Let's see. Yep, introduction to creative navigation. Go places that you have not been before in a covert ops frigate. That is what they are for. Uh, Search planet, like checking planets in systems that have a high degree of activity, is almost a surefire way to make a couple million ISK just out the gates. People don't always pick up their PI, and if you keep an eye out, the fuel market prices have recently risen, and it's never been a better time to be a thief, even of heavy water. Go where you were forbidden, and to get there, you're going to have to learn how to use your cloak, and you're going to have to learn how to slip past gate camps. But covert ops frigates give you all the tools needed to actually make that happen consistently. If you land on a bubble while cloaked, they don't know where to put the frigates, especially if you land on that bubble from the sun or a random planet and not from the opposite gate, which if you're coming from the opposite gate, they know exactly where to put their frigates or their destroyer. They'll put it right on the lip of the bubble, aligned with the gate, and be ready and waiting for you there with guns already warmed up. What you want to do is be unpredictable, especially when you're in a covert ops ship of any stripe. And frigates are the best way to learn. These guys are cheap. They are cheap and they are reliable. You can move precious goods, you can move tritanium, you can move whatever you got, especially in an Inimicus. It looks like a banana with a cane. It is the ugliest ship in the game, I would say, but also one of the most useful. It has a lot of like general utility. And your fitting goals should be aimed in that direction. You want to survive, or you want to like get the goods where they need to be. And I'll talk a little bit about the navigational beacon versus nav bacon thing here in a sec, but let's get into the actual like fitting goals for these things. Alignment time is one of the key limiters on transportation overall. Like the longer it takes for your ship to align to the distant gate, the more time you're going to be just chilling there and vulnerable and visible. If you're flying a covert ops ship, you don't want to be seen, period. So reducing your alignment time, especially in high and low sec, is juicy, is the goal. And inertial stabs are cheap. They've never been cheaper. Having 3 on the bottom of just a general like goods runner is effective. Otherwise, if you are going to expose yourself to any risk whatsoever, I highly recommend putting a covert ops cloak on your covert ops ship. Anything less and you are missing it, you might as well just use a regular Imicus or probe or whatever. Using the covert ops will allow you to warp while invisible, which is a lot stronger than I think most folks give it credit for out the gates. And what I like to fit on my covert ops ships is usually a red and a blue scanner, just to see how things are going in different systems. Knowing where miners are, for example, while passing through, and then coming back and checking in something a little bit more violent is a fun thing to do. But also finding rare sites, compressed sites for indie buds, or dead spaces for PvE buds, or even just sites for explorer buds. While moving goods, I mean, you're going to be moving the goods anyway. You might as well do something while moving, right? And covert ops frigates are really good at that, especially since they've got the cargo space and with the idea of fuel tanks in the game now. You don't sacrifice nearly as much cargo space when using them as you used to. So they're in a really sweet spot overall. And then your high slots, like if you are using anything in your high slots, you've probably messed up. I usually fit mine with cannons just because I'm skilled in that direction, but fit whatever you're skilled for on the off chance that you find someone sleeping. And then, put a kill mark on your random transport ship. And that's basically how covert ops frigates do, if you will. Fit them how you like, but... one more thing. You probably didn't expect to see an inertial stab here instead of a shield booster or something along those lines. If I am seen, if your covert ops frigate has ever been targeted, it's probably dead. You don't really need to increase your shields or repair your shields when you're going to die anyway. So you might as well reduce the likelihood of getting spotted overall. That's why I prefer an inertial stab there. Some folks like warp stabilizers too, but your time to align should be minimized to reduce even the the opportunity to get scanned down and locked on. All right, let's talk about the different module types in the game. This is something I think a lot of folks overlook or just take for granted, and a lot of new players aren't really familiar with. There are three main styles or rarities of standard issue modules. You got your grays, your greens, and your blues. Now, your grays are your common loot items. These you can procure pretty much anywhere of the appropriate tier space. They are common, they are everywhere, and they are reprocessable. If you turn them into minerals, you can use them for something else. And it's not like you paid for them, generally. If you're doing PvE, you pulled them from the cold, dead wreckage of a bunch of NPCs, you monster you. But you can put them to use for you, either by selling them straight up, which probably not the best return on investment, or investing in your skills to reprocess modules overall, or holding on to them for a general fitting and equipping of yeet ships. They're good enough, you know? They're not shiny, they're not fancy, but they're good enough. If you lose a ship, rockin' grays, you're not going to hurt. You're not going to feel bad at all. Greens, on the other hand, are a little bit rarer. They drop very commonly in bases, when you kill bases. Also special anomalies. Special rats, advanced NPCs, or pirates, they tend to drop greens. And occasionally they'll drop blues, especially on the higher tier stuff, tier 10s. But greens are, they're a step up. They're an upgrade from grays, just across the board, in general. I can't remember if Tech 9 gear is better. I don't think it is. I think greens are best overall. But what I like to do with those is dish them out to the corp for free. They don't, since they're uncommon, they're not rare enough to warrant high prices. You can get them on the market for real cheap. But pound for pound, like, they give you the most ISK efficient stats in general. So you want to equip your fleets, you want to equip your friends with greens as much as possible. Share those around. Get those into ships, and get those into kill mails or lost mails. If you want the best, though, if you want the highest grade modules, blues are the way to go. Those are like your Corellium or Pithy Type C, Type B, Type A, Type X. Those are the high tier items. Those are the fancy blinged out, like, I need every ounce of statistical advantage I can get to maximize the effectiveness of this ship. These are the things that you see on those blinged out battleships killing, basically farming ISK all over the place. Also for PvPers. PvPers like to use them too, because, you know, you've got the best advantage possible for relatively cheap price. Type Cs, I believe, are what most PvPers run with, just to reduce the amount of risk exposure. But you don't have to, especially if you've got a fleet. If you've got friends, the ships that your friends fly are way more cost effective as a group than if you were to go with just your blues alone, because you've got additional tackle, you've got additional tank, you've got additional HP and additional damage. It all depends on how they bring those stats to bear, but I'd much rather have a co-pilot or another person in my fleet than a blinged out, blued up ship of the line. There are special cases. There are some modules that you come from different sources than from pirates. And these special cases include civilian, test, and modified. I took civilian off there, but it's the same basic passive. Civilian, test, and modified modules will never drop if you lose your ship. Think about that for a moment. So, like, if you don't want to lose anything, fitting a ship with entirely test or entirely modified modules is a legitimate strategy. Because your rigs ain't going to drop, your nanocore ain't going to drop, and your modified modules won't either. And they're about the same combat effectiveness as, say, a green. They're not the best in the game, but for your money, they will serve you the longest. They have no chance of being lost unless lost in transit. So if you got them in your cargo bay, for example, and that ship dies, you might lose them that way. But otherwise, like, you can't lose them. They're the safest investment that you could possibly make. There are also non-reprocessable modules. Some of the rare greens, like Quaif railguns, that show up in different storyline missions, those are worth a lot of ISK in the long run, right? Because those can drop if your ship dies. but you can only get them in a certain way. So they've got a limited access, limited input, but a common output, a common loss approach, not including reprocessing. So because of that, like, they tend to pool, and their price, as loss mails with them on them increase, should go up over time. These are kind of like your investment modules, your swag factor modules, the things to hold on to find a good price and then ship, send them. But not necessarily the modules you want to be flying with, unless you've got nothing else. Also, they're kind of fun to stumble across, especially when cleaning out hangars. One of my favorite things to do is like reprocess all and then just get that fatty paycheck. But I did that this last week with some of Tuna's stuff and stumbled across some Quaif railguns, which is what prompted this topic overall. Because I just think the nuances surrounding the different items and loot affect their prices and utility, and I think it's really interesting to see those things and how they compare to one another. Overall, though, I have to say my favorite module type must be modified, and if NetEase ever releases a higher tier style module with that same passive does not drop, because it's a one-time investment, right? I've got a Hound 2 outfitted with all modified. I've got a Rupture outfitted with all modified, and I believe I am working on a Hurricane with modified. I'm not 100% on that, though. I'd have to check my bases. But having all modified on a ship means never having to say goodbye, never having to refit. You've got all the tools that you need to get it back out there and flying after the timer's done every time you lose it. And I think that's wonderful. I think it's less annoying, especially flying those in hostile territory, deploying them into distant stations, for example. Losing it out there, I don't have to do any logistics. I just wait a day and get it back with insurance. Refit, because I've saved my fittings for each of those modified ships and named them. That's a good way to name your ships, by the way. You can name your fittings, and then nobody else can see them, but you can. And you can do that little bit of storytelling for yourself. But that is my favorite thing to fit ships with. When not looking for overall combat effectiveness, right? If you've got a fleet of everybody using modified, you've got a force to be reckoned with, and one that you should be able to yeet willingly into almost any situation. Anyway, moving on from modules, let's talk about bases. All right. So this is contentious. This is probably my most contentious opinion overall, but I think folks are sleeping on it. I think folks aren't really paying attention to the amount of ISK returned for special anomalies and the amount of ISK returned for small, medium, and large, and the grind that creates. I think destroying bases is something that this game needs more of, and more players should try, because bases are hard, right? They're best tackled with a fleet. You got to bring your buds. Bases are like raid bosses. You get a higher rate of return in gray loot. You also get access to consistent source of green loot, and you get a lot of payoff for your Concord Pass, because bases have a steady stream of ships. Like, they have a higher number of ships than any other, with exception dead spaces and things like that, some of the higher tier anomalies. But they've got a high rate of return in terms of like kills and ISK rewarded, especially if you've got something tuned to speedrun that particular base. Clearing out multiple tier 3 bases in a Tall War Sniper, for example, and basically ramping up is probably one of my favorite operations to pull around Ostingley. Kill the tier 3 over in Stackman, jump from Stackman either to Slays for another tier 3, or over into Lowsec for tier 5, tier 6. And I'm pulling back the kimono quite a bit. I expect to be hunted because of this. But clearing those tier 5 and tier 6 bases in a sniper is amazing good fun, and probably not the best return on ISK in the short run, but the best return on ISK available within the space around Ostingley. And it's a renewable resource. I can do that once a week. And you can do that with any base almost once a week, tier 10s included. Tier 10s actually are even easier to renew, especially if they're in Sovereignty. You know, you just pay the 2 mil to have access to something that should pay out I believe 30-ish mil per tick overall, depending on what you've got. It really depends, like on the fleet and the fit. But in order to get the most, like the biggest bang for your buck on ticks, it helps to kill as many ships as possible, right, in the shortest period of time as possible. And other locations will give you better ticks, but not as consistently. And that's really what it comes down to is the value comparison between what you get out and the amount of labor that you have to put in to get that value. Bases offer the best bang for your buck, by my reckoning. And I've been wrong before. Could be wrong again. I firmly believe that good pirates make bad neighbors. You should be killing bases, if only to give lower tier players better content to hunt around in. Give them playgrounds, give them tier 6 levels and to climb up to experiment with different ships and fits. Because ship diversity brings strength. Strength brings strength, sure. But ship diversity has a few benefits that I think people are sleeping on when it comes to controlling their sovereignty. Having low-level bases as a buffer state, for example, having a string of low-level bases leading to your main sov. One, you've got the potential for people to rat in those those lower tier areas, which, I mean, for lower tier pilots, that's how you get them active. You give them things to do, right? And then they also serve as sort of like a living camera. You've got folks who are actively invested in the game and keeping an eye on local to see, you know, are they coming? Are they bringing a raid? In a better way than most Discord cameras could ever do, while also making ISK, while also providing potential content for neighbors, while also providing potential content for themselves, right? Because slow rolling is a thing. And the old Traplogy cruiser is a beautiful thing. There are different ways to play with how you present your forces and how you organize your sovereignty. And the main way to influence that is through the destruction of bases. It doubles as sign for hunters. Having people like stumble across your territory and see, hey, there's people around here, is something of an invitation. But if you don't clear the bases in your direct sov, they don't get good intel on what they're expecting, right? Unless they actually do follow up and check out like the areas where you have sov. So it helps. It helps in a way to either keep the enemy hunting in areas where you don't, or excuse me, keep the enemy hunting in areas where you want them to hunt, while avoiding the areas where you've got your prettiest toys. And then deciding in advance whether you want to bring those pretty toys to the fight and play the hero, or bring something faster, bring something lighter, bring something to actually create content, not necessarily just quash the enemy outright. I'm not saying look for fair fights. Far from it. I'm saying look for fights that your opponent is willing to take and then beat the tar out of them as an operational goal. Not that I'm any good at that. I'm not as effective a PvPer as a lot of the other content creators out there. But that's not really my game. I'm more about the long haul and investment strategies and minimizing risk overall. And I think that's something that a lot of folks overlook. Also, killing enemy bases. There is no accountability outside of intel channels, and the collusion that's occurring across the map is not beneficial to the market overall. And what do I mean by that? Well, gray loot is way cheaper than I would expect it to be because it's way more common than it should be. People aren't killing bases, which means there's no limited access to those different tiers of loot. If you've got a stockpile of Tech 9 cannons, like the biggest stockpile of Tech 9 cannons in the game, do you want that stockpile to grow in value, or do you want it to become cheaper over time? For anybody looking to make ISK, scarcity is your friend. Being able to sell the goods that you've collected at a higher price, especially when you didn't pay anything for them, is the best return on investment you could expect. So kill bases. Kill bases across New Eden. The pirates must die. Anyway, and stealing them is actually a favor to your enemy, is what I would say. Even yeah, just across the board. Because you are putting yourself forward, exposing yourself to risk in enemy territory, which is an opportunity for content, while also allowing for diplomatic events to occur, which I think is another kind of content. But your enemy doesn't actually lose anything from losing the base, right? They just, pay the 2 mil to refresh the base that they weren't using anyway. If it's just sitting there, not being used, what benefit is it to your enemy, period? Right? If you grind small, medium, and large anomalies all day, every day, you get decent ISK returns. You get decent rewards. The blueprints and things from scouts and inquisitors aren't nearly as rare as they used to be, though. And because everybody's doing the same thing, right, you're going to get the same thing that everybody else gets. So mix it up. Change your expectations. Change your approach. Start from square one and start killing pirates. They had it coming. And with that, we've come to the close of this week's Keep It Brief. The playlist for this week starts with Each Time I Die, which I think is appropriate for any Capsuleer, and just the sinister sound and cool rhythm there is awesome. Bones and Beaker knocked it out of the park. Risk is a little bit sadder, but also kind of cheerful, and something that I talk about all the time. So Mega Mango is appropriate for now. Blood / Water, Blood in the Water from Grandson is another good song. You probably heard it over the last couple of years. It was pretty popular in the Plague days. But what you probably haven't heard is Mary Mary by Magnolious. Magnolious is one of the weirdest sounds that I've ever heard, and I have never heard anything like it since. They I think released one album back in 2011 or 12 or something like that, and haven't really been around since then as far as I'm aware. But like, man, Mary Mary is a banger. They kill it, and it's unlike anything I've heard before. On the flip side, you've got Calling Old Friends by Defiance Ohio. That one has special emotional value to me. My ex-wife introduced me to that song, and it's one I'd like to share with you. To close out November and celebrate a lot of the horror movies that have been crossing my radar lately, there's A Playful Scare Me from Ludo. It's the name of their latest album, I believe. But the song itself is really fun. And then to round out with a bit of a joke song, Potato Song by Kesha it's stompy and silly, and it's on the list because I want it to be. So, yeah. One last thing before you go. I want playtesters. Me and my buddy are working on this game called Dungeon Blackjack, and we've got our prototype ready for testing, and would like to share that with others. One of the selling points is its modular design, so no two games will ever be alike. It's blackjack. Everybody knows how to play blackjack, right? But with a fantasy spin and weird items like the broadsword, which probably stolen wholesale from Munchkin, but there are others, and that name is probably going to change as time goes on. But like, there's a bunch of things in there that are strange and fun and curious, like blue suede shoes and things like that. And then the classes, you level those up as you go through the dungeon, and the dealers are the monsters, basically. Like, it's fun. I enjoy it. I hope other people will enjoy it. I want to create the best game possible, which means I need opinions. So if you have opinions, please hit me up on the Echoes of Nui Discord next time you swing on by there, or give me a shout out on Discord in general, or comment here, and I'll do my best to either get you into a round of Tabletop Simulator if you've got it, and if not, I'll send you some print and play cards, or give you a link so you can buy the cards that we use for prototyping at cost, because it's not ready to sell. Yeah, excuse me, it's not ready to sell proper, but I want to get it there. And yeah. Links below. Like, subscribe. This has been the Keep It Brief. Hopefully I managed to keep it, brief.